Alrighty, welcome everyone. Welcome to our weekly Saturday scripting event where we talk about scripting and other various scripting topics. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Last week we talked about particles and making new particles and figuring out how to just get all that stuff working. And it resulted in us having a particle or an object that we could turn on essentially, and particles would emit from it. It first started with vanilla particles and then our own custom particle, which is pretty cool. And today we'll go ahead and cover a topic that's pretty close to particles as well in terms of like the workflow, which is sounds. Sounds will enhance your mods depending on what you're doing. Currently, I'm building Molotov cocktails, and I had just the flames and the fire, but there's no sound, and so it kind of feels hollow a little bit. And that's one reason why we're going to be working on sounds today, is because they kind of work together. They do the same thing from the code perspective, in the sense that you set your object up and then you tell it to do a certain thing. For particle's sake, you tell it what particle to draw and then it just draws it. Whereas the same with sound, you just give it the sound set or the string that represents the sound that you want to play, and it just plays it out of position. So the workflow is very similar. So today's session should feel very familiar and not too out in left field. We're gonna go ahead and do like a mini cassette player mod. We won't work with like the syncing player sounds and stuff, but I know that people love cassettes, and there are a few mods on the workshop that are just cassette players and tapes. And I want to let people know and show them how they can A, add their own cassette players, B, add their own cassettes and sounds, and C, like get them all hooked up together. So that should be kind of what today's about. Let's go ahead and jump on in. We'll go down to our test files, right? In my test mod, I got all this stuff here from last time. Right. So let's go keep jumping out over here. All right. So first things first, we're going to open up our example, the flare, the road flare, because it's really good to use as an example. It's got a lot of working parts. So in my VS Code, inside of the P drive, I'm going to open up my search function class road flare, and it's going to bring up road flare stuff. Here's the script class. That's the light. Okay. So just like last time when we were in here for the particles, I'm going to be looking for something that looks like a sound. If I'm a new modder and I've never done anything with sounds before, I'm not really going to know where to look, but I know what I'm wanting, and we'll try and intuit what we need to get. So starting from the top, I'm just going to look for anything that looks like a sound. And about halfway down, you can see that there's a comment here that says sounds. Perfect. We're in the right spot, allegedly. Continuing down, we see a object or a class type effect sound. The variables m burning sound as well as ignite sound. We have some burning sounds here for strings that represent the sound set. So if I don't know anything, I'm kind of realizing that sounds are more than just a single thing. And then it looks over here, burning noise range. Looks like we can control the range at which this sound is heard. All right, we're nothing too complex yet, and this is just me looking at the code and trying to put into plain English what I'm seeing. I keep going down, just to see what's here. Timer, model, a bunch of strings representing a state. Oh no, these are the selections on the object. Here are the integers representing those selections on the object. Here are the textures. Noise params. Okay, so then you continuing down, you would see this thing noise params, and you might think, okay, well, noise is a sound, right? Well, this is not technically a sound. It is more of a functional noise for AI and other world-based things. And so if you wanted your noise to actually alert Zeds or nearby animals, you would then create this noise parameter, and then it would influence the strength of that noise and where it goes and the direction and stuff like that. From our case, we're not gonna deal with noise params. That's a whole nother deal with AI. But just knowing that they are related to sounds, just not the auditory part. It's more of the script internal functional part. Because we have to, if you're simulating like alertness with zombies and distance, like you got to have something that represents that in the code sense, not the audible sense. Okay, going back up, we only have 2 sounds here. I'm gonna start with the burning sound. Actually, no, the ignite sound, because if you go in a game and you have a road flare and you turn it on, you'll notice that there are a couple sounds. It'll go like that. And the first 2 sounds that you heard are the igniting sounds. And then the longer term sound is the burning sound. And most likely what we'll find is this one sound is played once and the burning sound is looped. So let's go and see if that hypothesis is verified. So I'm gonna search this file for the ignite sound. All right. And just by looking here, this variable is used inside of the delete function. So whenever the road flare is deleted, we are also destroying the sound. That makes sense. We need to clean up our variables, and sounds are kind of things that exist out in the world. And if we were to delete the item and not the sound, then we would have a dangling reference out there, which is ripe for memory leak, essentially. So we got to clean up our variables. And it looks like on work start, so when we turn the flare on, because the flare basically turns on and you can't turn it off, the logic says if the game is not the server, if it's not multiplayer, so basically if we're on the client is the one executing this code, play the sound set loop, the burning sound. Okay, we're looping a sound here, and then play sound set ignite sound. So just like we mentioned up top, where like given our experience in game, we've heard what the road flare sounds like, we can validate that functionality here in the code. So I hypothesized that ignite sound was a single sound played once and the burning sound was a loop, and down here we can kind of validate that hypothesis and conclude that that is correct. So within the first 15 minutes of this video, you already kind of have the beginnings understanding of how to actually play a continuous sound set versus a single sound set. And this determines how you record your sound and what sound you actually use and things like that. All right, and that's it. I mean, sounds are relatively easy. Let's go ahead and replicate this behavior. Let's go ahead and I need to make my own item. So I'm gonna get the class radio. I know vanilla has a like cassette player, their own like model. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and grab that. I'm gonna copy paste. Let's go ahead and look at the internals, the guts of this thing. Make sure you take if you're a new modder and you're just copy and pasting this, make sure you copy this inherited class right here, this inventory base, and put it somewhere in the class above. I'm not going to go into why you need to do that. You just need to do that. I think we covered it in one of the earlier videos. If not, ask the question and I'll answer it later. Okay, scope 2. This means our object is spawnable. It's viewable in the game. Like I can actually spawn it with admin tools. If it was scope 1, I would need to use scripts to spawn it, like an event. And if it was scope 0, it would be completely untouchable by the game, essentially invisible. It'd be a way how to remove items out of the database without actually physically deleting them. Display name, our new radio. Description, some fancy description, the model. We're going to just keep the model here. Normally you can like change it to whatever you want, but I don't have a model. Animation class, I don't know what that does. Weight is how heavy the item is. This is in grams, so it's 1.7 kilograms, so roughly 3.4 pounds. Item size, X and Y, fragility. I think this has something to do with how easy it'll break when shot, although I'm not entirely certain. You'd have to search the files for that. Absorbency, how much water does it absorb? Simulation, the script class associated with it. And this simulation variable is advanced. Don't touch it unless you know what you're doing. Attachments. What attachments can actually go on this item? It's different than inventory slot, which is what do I attach to? I'm not sure what old power is. That might be backwards compatibility. Repairable with kits. What kit will repair this item? How much will it cost? If you have multiple items in this list, they need corresponding items in the other list. Otherwise, the repair will be 0, and that's not good. The energy manager. I saw somebody in scripts the other day asking how would you decrease the amount of battery consumption in a radio. This is where you would do it. You can see auto switch off is will this thing switch off if you put it in your inventory. Energy usage per second is how much quantity of a battery does it use per second. And so if I wanted to increase the amount of consumption, so like every second it takes 2 quantities, so this radio would only run for like maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Or we could say let's double the time, and I'll just add a 0 in front of this. Or actually that's a 10 times increase, so doubling this would be 4, or increasing the time double would be 0.1. But anyway, this is the variable that you would use to influence how much consumption of the battery per second. Damage class, don't really need to worry about this. This just controls at what time does the pristine, worn, damaged, badly damaged, and ruined, when does that show, and how should the thing look when it's at that state. Melee modes, this is what defines your damage of the item when it's in your hands and you hit somebody. Oh, I guess I assume that's why it's animation class knives, because it's when you're in your hand, you swing like a knife. All right, that makes sense. This is where range, so you could technically have a melee weapon that really hits far if you wanted. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you could. And these channels, this is a deprecated class, you don't need it. I'm just gonna. One day, I can imagine that they will allow this type of stream fetching. If we could stream stuff in DayZ, oh my gosh, man, we could have a webhook online that's just an audio feed, and man, we could have dynamic radios. It'd be so sweet, but we just don't have that capability yet. And then the sound impact type. What does this thing sound like when it hits the ground? All right, let's go ahead and rename my thing. This is going to be my audible item. Okay. And to make sure everything works correctly, we're going to look at the script class of the radio. And we're going to copy that as well. Scripts, for world, entities, item base, new class, file my audible item.c. And I'm just going to copy this thing here and paste it into here. And I need to copy my name, my class name, because we're not a radio, we're my audible item. Okay, let's look at what this thing is. What's the guts of this class? All right, class my audible item extends item radio. Item radio must be some class in vanilla. I search for it. Yep, it's here. It's an inventory item super. It's got some extra stuff on it. We don't really need to worry about it. This, just know that, item base is kind of special, and it can have a couple other things that are special items, like transmitters and megaphones and barrels and ooh, an underslug launcher. I wonder if they're adding something new. Ooh, it's always fun crawling vanilla scripts. You can see the beginning code of what they're trying to lay down. Looks like the GPS is in here, the compass is in here. So, there are just some special items out there and they're named specially. So that's what our radios are. It's a transmitter. Okay. That means it can make sound. Can operate. Okay. Looks like we got a helper function based on the EM, the energy manager. Get comp EM, so get component energy manager. That's what that stands for. Are you switched on? We get some events since we're an item base or an entity AI. We have on switch on switch off, on work stop. So we know when these events happen and we can hook into them, which we will. When we turn this thing on, we want to play a sound. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Looks like we can tune to the next station. We can tune to the previous station. I don't actually want those, so I'm going to comment that action out down here. And this is why I copied the existing radio, because it has some of this functionality already scaffolded for us, and I didn't want to have to build them. So since I got rid of that action, we can get rid of these helper functions for that. I'm not going to remove them. I'm just going to comment them out. Okay, so looking at our item here, we have an audible item, which is just a cassette player. It can be turned on or off. We can attach a battery to it. All right, let's go make sure that our stuff is actually working. We'll boot up the game. So this is one of those points where we've written some code. We could technically continue further, but we've written enough code that we can actually test something in game, and we should test it because it could potentially break later on, and we wouldn't know if it was the code we wrote now that broke it or the code we wrote later. So again, when you're building mods, try to make them in such a way that you can test them frequently to make sure that the changes that you're doing are actually the ones that are breaking the stuff. It becomes easy to fix your code and to debug it without other people's help when you work in small chunks and those chunks are verifiable. Not to say that you don't have to work with other people's or get other people's help. It's just some people want you to spoon feed it to them. It's like, gotta do a little digging. Little digging. Oh, that's right. I can't do it on this one because I don't have admin tools. Oh my gosh. Well, at least the mod loads. I gotta really figure out why that doesn't do that. It's so weird. All my other diag modes give me a profile folder. Not a problem. Bring the server over here. Okay, cool. Have everything I need. Server, client. Why is it using the churn loading screen? That's so weird. Oh, is it because the mission wasn't started yet? Gotta love that startup time. Nice. Okay, cool. So my audible, there it is. Okay, cool. Spawn on the ground. All right, looks like a radio. It's got our name, our new radio, some fancy description, about 2 kilograms. I can put it in my hands. I have the turn on action. Is it on? Cool. It won't turn on because there's no battery. It's got the slot for the battery. This is one of the nice things about inheriting existing items. You don't have to do much. Although it does come at the cost of sometimes vanilla does change, and so you have to be on top of it. Turning on with the battery in. Oh no, that didn't work. Okay, so we might have to do a little work in the action to get this thing turned on. Interesting. Half expected to be on. But see, this is why you test frequently, because had I done a bunch of stuff, we would have kind of gotten to the game and I'd be wondering what the heck is going on. So now at least I know that the action might need a little bit of tender love and care. Let's go ahead and see what the action turn on is doing, and maybe suss out why this isn't working the way I would expect. Okay, so going back to my item, action turn on transmitter. It's probably this right here. Let's do exact match. Perfect. If the item is a transmitter, if it has an energy manager and the item is not working. Okay. And then the callback, see, a single use turn on plugged in is doing let's look at class personal radio. Let's see what a regular radio does. Just a regular transmitter base. See, this thing switches on. On, switch on. On, switch on. Just switches on. Strange. Well, I wonder if this stuff is even working. Let's put a print in here. On, switch on. Let's go ahead and say print. And if you notice, I'm using a lowercase p here. It's because that will print out to my console instead of to the logs. So just another way of printing things out and seeing what's going on. Turned on. And then I'm wondering if it's just getting turned off on its own. Turned off. And then when we switch off, switched off. Interesting. This transmitter doesn't have the can operate. Maybe I'll just say return true. Does anyone else have this thing? Tune radio station. See, this is what I was kind of half expecting in the action, like there to be a explicit class cast. Like this, in my opinion, is a ball buster for modders, mainly because only at this point only a radio can actually be turned on, which is not cool because my thing isn't a radio; it's an audible item that extends item radio. It would have been nicer if this was item radio instead of just radio. I'm wondering if there are more of these types of things. Radio.cast. Nope, it's only on the tune radio station, so maybe we're safe. Anyway, if these prints print, that's all I care about, because if the event is hit, then we can play the sound. No big deal. Like, I don't need these switch on to work. That's not the focus of the video today. So I put some prints in here, and you know, my experiment here is when I click the button, I'm expecting to see. Oh, okay. Did not like that. I've used lowercase print before. Oh, it's an immersive placing override. Jeez. Really? Yikes. Okay, well, never mind. That's funny. Okay. It worked a little bit ago, so fair enough. Fix that. I mean, I guess I could just say get chat player. Here we go. There. This is another way to just print out stuff. One of the downfalls of diag mode and workbench is that if I'm adding or removing functions, it just doesn't recompile. You'll have to repack your mod for the dynamic recompile to work. So, not perfect. Oh crap, I didn't have the chat open, sorry. No, you can't proxy stuff on vanilla items. You can only add child. I mean, it's possible to add stuff onto vanilla things, but you have to use add child and you have to manage that, which is a little bit advanced. I could give an overview of my fish rack mod, which kind of does that. He wants to replace the spare wheel slot. No, you can't do that. I mean, oh, look at that. It turned on. Okay, so the state of our radio probably is just busted. The item radio is probably not meant to just keep its state on, which is fine, because it's not really an item in the game that's used. And if you notice, like I'm clicking the turn on a bunch of times, but it only prints once. It's because you can't turn it on more than once. Once it's on, you can't turn it on. So the action is kind of scuffed here, but that's okay, because at least we can just play its sound. Cool. So let's go back to the road flare. Go back to our Nick sounds. So we're gonna go ahead and copy that. Actually, no, we're not gonna copy it. We're gonna write it out explicitly. Protected effect sound m underscore my first sound, and the m is there is just for member variable. G is global, S is static. So then there's the sound, and let's go ahead and turn it on. Oh, actually, let's also clean it up. So when we get rid of the audible item, and that's going to be the destructor void. I forget. Top of my head. I always forget. Ah, that's right. It's after. My audible item. And there we go. So I'm not sure if I've covered this in the other videos or not, but what we're looking at here is a constructor and destructor. When you inside of object-oriented programming, you have the notion of objects, and you can create new objects. So the creation of new objects implies that there is a creation point where the thing actually gets created, and that's what we in the programming world we call that the constructor. This is like where things are assigned and like memory is allocated. This is when the object exists in memory, in most cases, and that also implies that there won't be objects in the future when the program closes, and so there is also a inflection point or milestone when the object is destruct or destroyed, and the syntax for that is right here with this little squiggle line in front of the class name, in front of the constructor, essentially. And this is the last code that is run when this object is dereferenced and cleaned up by the garbage collector and just like deleted. And I say deleted, I use air quotes because it's removed from memory and all that jazz. So when you want something to run at the very end of something, I mean, right here we have delete. It's on EE delete because this road flare is deleted. But in our case, we're not going to be deleting our item. It doesn't get ruined. It's not being destroyed. It just gets removed when the game closes. And so the destructor is a perfect place for this. All right. One thing, I wouldn't call it a pet peeve, but one way to tell a new programmer from an old programmer is newer programmers will say deconstructor, and there's no deconstruction happening. It's destructor. So just mind your P's and Q's. Some scripters and programmers are very anal about saying the right things and using the right terms and stuff. I don't really care. I know what you're saying when you say deconstructor, but some people might call you out. All right, so let's go ahead and destroy this sound. SE effect manager. Destroy effect. My first sound. Cool. And then let's actually play the sound. So when we switch on, play sound set. My first sound. Sound set name. And these other last values are delay and fade in, fade out, I believe. Let's go ahead and look for sure. Let's see, the sound object, the reference, the string sound name, the fade in, the fade out, and then the loop. Cool. So let us go ahead and get a sound set that's vanilla before we add our own custom sound set. I like using the explosion sound set. It's one of my favorites. Blurry distant. Okay, if we've done everything correctly, when we turn on our radio, it should explode. Go and try it out. Oh boy. Yeah, one of the problems with the add child method of proxying is that it only works on single bone things. Like you can't make a bendy clothing like attachment with add child. That's the only problem. It has to be rigid. You could add an M60 gun mount to the top of your car. That would work. Yeah, car roof rack. Absolutely. Add child. You could easily put in object builder, you could proxy in a car and then find out the memory points on top of the car for each car, and then you could differentiate where the attachments are based on that. Can you show later how to add a proxy in object builder? I mean, I'll do it right now. It's easy. Well, air quotes easy. Go ahead and just open up a weapon and melee blade. Let's do homemade axe, right? There are a bunch of videos that go over how to set up object builder, so I'm not gonna like go over it how I have it here, but I mean, all you gotta do is go up to create proxy, boom, browse. I want a proxy of, let's do car. Let's put a car in here. Cool. There's my, so there's the car proxy. And then if I open object builder, or if I start running bulldozer, we'll see a car right next to my, okay. So now, what you get to do is come over here and press F7 to create a box. Right? And you can start figuring out and positioning out where things are. So, right, if this was at the origin, really, you wouldn't even need a box, right? Just put F7 or insert for point, right? And so I move the point around. I probably can't see the point in here. That's probably why I use a box. And then you use like one of the corners as their measuring point or something. Yeah, that front left corner. Something like that. Yeah, I mean, Bulldozer is really powerful. And this is what I use. So let's go to the, when I did the Infinity Gauntlet, you know, you go in and you manually place the proxies, which means, you know, sometimes if it's on a freaking person and it's rotated, right, you gotta rotate that crap in the different orientations. So get it looking. This is how people get really nice looking proxies. They spend, you know, 30 minutes to an hour figuring out what's the perfect orientation here. Yeah, no problem. So basically, it's kind of a reverse proxy. You import the car as a proxy rack, as a proxy to the rack instead of import the rack as a proxy. Well, this is purely for positioning. So like I do this so that I know, because I know the car has its own. So we covered this in the last video with particles, with the 3D and local space. The world has its own three-dimensional space, and then the object itself has its own three-dimensional space, its own personal space, if you mind you. And so this individual point here, if I can select it, this one point here, okay, if I were to get its XYZ location, I could technically use that local coordinate plane in my car and then just say attach my barrel here, like right here. And that's how you would use add child and stuff like that. Because if you know where in the world to add the object, then you just add it straight up, no big deal. Whereas with like so that's essentially what proxies are. I mean, I assume DayZ themselves has their own system handling proxies, where really a proxy just takes the orientation of this triangle, right? Because all the proxy is this triangle, takes it and adds it to the child, adds it to the object as a child. I mean, I assume that's what's happening because I've built the same type of logic for my fish racks. Yeah, for proxies, the square edge of the triangle, this one right here. And the orientation of the proxy itself is relative to the P3D. So if you see my axe here, it's sitting here, it's pointing to the left, it's facing front, top down. Like the proxy would have it the same orientation, then I would need to move it around. You can also technically scale this thing down if you wanted. If you want it to be smaller, just make sure you do it in all directions. Otherwise, it's like big. Yeah. That's proxies in a nutshell. Proxies are one of the hidden gems of DayZ. Kind of simple. There's plenty of tutorials over it, so I don't really touch on it much. All right, back to our radio example. If I turn this on, we should hear a sound. No! Oh, we're not even getting our prints anymore either. Oh! I think I know what's happening. So this sometimes what happens as a new modder, you do some work, and now things aren't behaving as you expected. And I should have been speaking through my thinking, but if you notice, we didn't get a turned on function. Like we didn't get the chat message out to us. So that immediately flagged to me something catastrophically has gone wrong. Like last time we started up our code, we did see it. We added this and then rebooted the game, and now it's not showing. So like red flags and alarm bells should be shooting off in everyone's head now that this line of code that we added is what broke things. So to verify that, right, I'm going to go into the logs and make sure, because it's most likely what happened. Something's happened here. Going into my script logs. Oh, there's no logs in here. Huh. Okay. What about regular logs? Strange. Oh, we don't have a battery. What the hell? Oh yeah, that's nice. I have two monitors, but when I showcase and stream here, I'm trying to show everything in a single screen. So there's a lot of alt tabbing. But yeah, I have two screens as well because it just makes it easier. Oh, it was working, but it was turned off. Okay, cool. So if we turn on, there you go. Can you guys hear that? Kaboom. Now our turn off is working for some reason. Wonder how that worked. Maybe I didn't pack it. But there you go. I mean, sounds are one of the simpler things in scripting, which is why I'm surprised they're not used more often in other mods. So, ooh. Yeah, so let's go ahead and add in our own sound now. Since we know the sounds work, okay. Let's go add in our own sound. Okay, so if I go to an example. Oh, nice. Yeah, you got your rack up there. Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, and now it's just a question of getting the type of the vehicle they're attaching it to, and you can change the position based on whatever's there. And so now you can even support modded vehicles, which is cool. Yeah, vehicles are very difficult, mainly because there's not much documentation on them, and this on the script side it requires a lot of copy paste, and you can't touch stuff because of the hard overrides, and carwheel is not moddable. So there are a lot of unmoddable classes in vehicles at the moment. Slowly that's being changed, thanks to Rag Tyson and him sort of documenting some of the hardships and nuances, and the devs can kind of see that and help out. But yeah, vehicles is definitely up there. I personally have never put a vehicle in game for that reason. It's just not. It's a lot of struggle that I don't really want to deal with, and I feel comfortable in my my existing areas. And I already started a map, so okay. Let's get on to adding a sound. If you'll notice, I've sort of opened up an example of one of my other mods for cassette tapes. I recorded a bunch of Kuru things about. Excuse me. I recorded a bunch of Kuru tapes based on a real study in the real world on Papua New Guinea, and this is kind of the output of that. And so, looking at the scaffolding of this config file, there's a couple things that are different than normal modding. One of the few things that's the same is the CFG patch. Name your patch uniquely. Require DAISY sounds and effects. And so the first change that you'll notice is we're not using CFG vehicles, we're using CFG sound shaders and CFG sound sets. Okay. And these are really all you need to make your sound in the game. All right. Let's look at a sound shader first. The shader is the thing that defines what the sound is. Okay. It gives us properties like the frequency, how often should it be done? The range, how far should it be heard? The volume, how loud should it be? Now, when we're dealing with other people's mods, sometimes you might want to change the volume of somebody's sound. And so a good example is the horse mod. Hunter's horse mod. These horses are very loud. All right. And they are it goes almost 800 meters. And so on our roleplay server, I went in and I found the sound shaders of his horses and I reduced it by 50%. I also modified the sound shader to have a range of 200 and a lower curve for like a trail off effect when sounds move away from you. And so knowing the relationship between a sound shader and a sound set is really useful because you can modify the sounds at their base level. And so I've made a few changes and now all horses are much more manageable and quieter for, people on the server. Where did my stuff go? Okay. Does sound volume decrease itself with distance? No, you have to actually build a range for that. Which is what I was showing here. This range curve, this is the curve that dictates how loud a sound should be given the distance from its origin or source. So again, local space, right? My sound has a coordinate system. It might be in the world at 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, but it itself has its own distance between sounds, where if you're right next to it, 0 meters away, there's no curve. Whereas if you're 50 meters away, the sound is 80% loud. 75 meters away, it is... Oh, it looks like I made a mistake there. That should be like 0.5. But as it goes farther away, you should be able to modify strength of the sound. And that's how you do it here. The range curve. Okay. So once you have a base sound shader, so just like any other classes in inheritance, you can define certain parent classes for sounds. In my case, I wanted all of my cassettes to sound uniform, and so I gave them the same range and the same volume. You might want to have different ones, like rock cassettes, louder, maybe R&B sounds be quieter, or anything. You can really just change it and do however you want. This is just one example. So how do I actually tell my OGG sound file that it's in the game? Well, you do it by defining samples. And there are a couple ways to do this. If you look in vanilla, you'll see that this array of samples has multiple things inside of it. I've often seen people asking questions like, how do I get my samples to play randomly? I personally have never figured that out. I have an assumption it's to do with animations and animation frames. But, Derp can help with that. Like, I always assumed I could just do something like this. Right? Like, boom, now I have 10 random sounds, and anytime I call this sound shader, it would just randomly pick one. But what I've discovered in practice is that's not the case. And so I'm glad that Derp mentioned this, because if you noticed, I'll bring this over in chat in a window here, open a new open link. You notice the sounds that they've picked here are for zombies. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that I believe this is linked to animations. Whereas when I'm just playing sounds out in the wild, I don't have an animation tied to it. Oh, wait. Wait, is this the weight? This number here, the number isn't actually the strength of the sound, it's the probability of it, huh? So the reason mine never worked is because they were 0.1. Let's do some sleuthing here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 5, 6. I mean, 1.25 is 1/8, right? No. Yeah. Okay. So fun. That's awesome. I'm glad that you're here to show me that. So for those that are at home and watching the video, try experimenting with multiple sounds and putting decimal numbers here and see if your sounds rotate. I'm not going to do it here on the video because we got a deadline to hit, But I think that'd be a fun wrestle for those that are home. And leave a comment on the video for, you know, people behind, or not, you know, whatever. I'll probably get to it eventually. That's cool. Thank you, Derp. I appreciate that. Cool. So let's decompose what we're looking at here. We have the base class, we have the name of our child class, and we have a samples array. And that array is pointing to file paths and the weight of probability to play that sound. And so if we look at my example, we'll go into IAT, core, music plus, sounds, Kuru, data, and you can see all my OGGs here. And if I were to open it up, DLC is going to take forever.
If this is so, it will prove to be a significant problem for
sound.
secondary.
Cool. So we've linked the sound, the physical sound file, to a class in the game that we can actually reference. And so now we need to make it into something that the game can actually consume and run. And we have that notion or I guess feature is called a sound set. And from a sound set, we can take sound shaders, and just like the sound shader, we have an array. And so again, you can have your sound set play multiple sound shaders if you had more than one item here. Blah, 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 blah. Easy peasy. For cassettes, you usually just want one sound per cassette, so that's kind of why you see it this way. But most sound shaders, if you're gonna Google or, you know, look into, it looks like these ones are all single as well. Ooh, that one had some nice. So there's all, excuse me, there are some properties that you have available to you, like start delay. You'll notice that the sound sets for base game are inherited differently. There are lots of different versions and sort of definitions for sounds. The base game is a wealth of information if you go through there. Cool. So you take the sound shape. Excuse me, something's in my throat. Excuse me. Okay. You take your sound shader and you put it inside of the class for the sound set. And the sound set is what enables you to use this sound across mods, like Derp is saying here in chat. So just like earlier when I was, if I can get to my audible item, just like earlier how I was referencing the artillery sound as a string and it's its own sound set. Let's go ahead and actually look at it. See, it's got its own sound shader and everything. It's one of the reasons why I went this way, because we can very easily tell if our custom sound is working. All right, so we'll go back to it. Okay, so that's all we need. We need these two things right here: a sound shader and a sound set, and then, you know, some code referencing it, which is nice and easy. Let's go ahead and add that. My test mod. All right, we already have a class. So for me and the purposes of a proof of concept, I'm just going to dump it into my main config class here. I'd recommend you, those that are watching and those that are practicing and sandboxing, to sort of split it out and make your own sounds folder and things like that to follow vanilla file structure, just because it's cleaner that way. sound shaders. And then just so I don't forget, class CFG sound sets. Okay. Oh, it's still being used. Now, let's go ahead and make a nice base class for all of our sounds for now, since they're all the same. My sound shaders base samples array equals some empty object. The frequency is equal to 1, and the range is equal to 100 meters. The volume is equal to 1. Didn't make any typos there. One of the problems of typing out instead of copy pasting. Now we're going to say class my sound shaders some custom sound extends my sound shader base. Cool. So just like over here, we have a base class set up for our sounds. We're defining a specific sound from that base class. Then we need a string, number. So this is going to be some OGG. We'll fill that in later. We'll come down here and make our sound set. So class my custom sound set. And I guess we'll name it some custom sound. Generally, the way I name my variables is like the base class and then underscore base, and then for the specific classes, it's underscore the variant. This makes it a little easier to know where things come from. Sound shaders array equals some string. And that string is this class name right here. Boom. Okay. Now I can take my sound set class name, go back to my audible item, and replace artillery distance sound with, I'm going to just go ahead and duplicate that so we have it. I should just be able to do that, and my sound will work. If I had a sound hooked up, it would play. Let's go ahead and get a sound. I'll just go ahead and duplicate some of that Kuru stuff. So yeah, I should just put in the sounds anyway. Cool. Nice thing about VS Code is I can just right click any option, any file, copy relative path. So let me put this back here. Easy peasy. So as you can see, what file am I using? My test mod, sounds, Kuru-1 OGG. This should be all I need. Go ahead and pack it up. And we'll run. I'll answer your question here, Derp, here, while the server's loading. Fingers crossed I didn't make any scripting errors. Off-topic question there, Tree, since you're far more experienced with scripting, is it possible to set a certain class name custom zombie to set a movement speed via M movement speed? Essentially setting a static value for it instead of using a config base that would override global zombie speeds. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Zombies or AI are a few things that can actually have their movement speeds modified in game. Players you can't, and it's an anti-cheating measure, but yeah, There's get string config, get array config, those type of helper variables that just allow you to read the config of a object of a type. And so what I do init variables all right. So for me, and you should look into item base as well. There's something called init item variables. And this function will show you how to basically read from config. And the reason why I suggest this function is because it's run only once when the item is created, instead of running it on the action. Ideally, if your list is static, you should never continue fetching it. You should just cache the value, because fetching from the config is very expensive. It's parsing strings. It's very heavy on performance relative to like adding two integers together or doing array cast. And so in this case, you can see in vanilla, the entity AI, it grabs like the temperatures in it, the max, the mins, my freezing points, my overheating times, like temperatures and stuff like that. And I abuse the heck out of this for my like die systems and stuff. So like I have a whole color system in the game. I have bio protections. There are cybernetic and mutant variables that are stuck on top of in the config. And if I was to go look at the color variants, like for all base classes, that has this root class name and an array of color variants, and so it allows me to sort of encode into the config what the recipe should be looking for when trying to recolor items. And so this way I only need a single recipe to recolor any vanilla item or modded item for that matter. I already look for color variants, right? Let me find a big one, right? So like leather pants. So here's me sort of setting up configs then for my recipe to figure out. So I just have all this metadata out there that I'm parsing when the game loads. Why do people use Makiro for packing? I've heard about some things that add-on builder can't catch, but never seen one myself. That's an opinionated topic. PBO project works for config-based linting or like style checking. It'll catch if you're missing paths or if you're not inheriting certain classes. It'll just cause the server to crash. It's very ARMA motivated. PBO project definitely is good for most modders. I mean, for the majority of people. I would say that as you get more familiar with Workbench, you can kind of supplant PBO project, because Workbench keeps you in the guardrails for, is my code syntactically correct and will it crash the server when it starts? I personally only use PBO project a couple of times. I use something called HemT, which is an ARMA build platform built in Rust. No, it doesn't check scripts. There's no script checking. Oh, you can hear my cassette is playing. There you go. We didn't destroy the sound effect when turning off, so that's something we could do where in the audible item, right, instead of, we could also put that here. Destroy the sound when we stop. How did I add the chat, Prince? Oh, with just this. get game chat player. There's this widget here. This widget has a max length, so be careful. Something's wrong and won't binarize. You can ignore that. I mean, VBO tools are pretty good. I mean, there's really no other alternative. Add-on Builder is good, but it will also pack anything. So it depends on, like, do you want to give new modders the rope to hang themselves with, or do you want to kind of give them something that gets them understanding what the rope actually does? It's a double-edged sword. It really is. I advocate for whatever's easiest to the person, and usually Makero's free tools are all you really need. Cool. So that sounds, I mean, not really much to it. Anything extra is like added logic. I mean, if we look at my cassette player that I've made, we can see the same exact behaviors just wrapped in some Boolean logic. Let's see. Right, so in my cassette player, we have a single sound, but if you want other people to hear it that were not nearby when you turned on your cassette player, you'll need to keep track of some of that state, because if you're already playing, you don't want to restart the sound. That's bad. And then some other things about like volume. I released a public mod for, or I will eventually be releasing a public mod to turn any transmitter up or down. But at this point, you do have script access to the sound wave that is being played. And so in this case, I allow the player to turn the volume up to 1.5 times its existing volume, and I can turn it all the way down to 0. So if somebody comes by and it's like, hey, I need to talk to you, it's like, I don't have to turn off the song. I could just quiet it for a little bit. And you can see that there's some net syncing. But in reality, with a cassette player, you want to be able to handle when you attach something to it, when you detach something from it, i.e. the battery or the cassette tape itself, when it's moved inside of a cargo, when the cassette player actually starts working. You want to essentially play if it needs to play, or not play if it needs to not play. When the cassette player is turned off, it should stop all sounds. We should be able to synchronize this state across the network when somebody moves into my radius so they can hear the sound. You need to be able to play the sound. I mean, this is me kind of doing some ternary stuff. I wouldn't recommend it as a new person. Turning on, turning off. You need to be able to turn on and off your cassette player. You need to be able to stop it. And these are just helper functions. So like a cassette player, if we look at our sound, all right, if I go to the sound, active sound, get the volume, set the volume. Does the sound exist? If it does, stop it. Otherwise, play it as a loop. Stop the sound if it exists. Stop it. So, I mean, I'm not doing anything complicated in this file other than Boolean logic and some other stuff. So, like what the video we cover today essentially shows you how you can build your own cassette player, because sounds are relatively simple. Cool. I'm going to go and call it there because, again, I have some other stuff to do, and this topic really isn't that intense. Any questions from the wider group in here? I can focus on something specific if you would like for the next 10 minutes. Otherwise, we can close it. Let's go and open up our config over here. This is kind of what we wrote today. Very, very, very simple stuff. Rid of that. So it's all on one page. Cool. I'll make sure to upload this video as soon as I can. And I hope everyone has a good weekend. Appreciate you all coming in and attending. Let's see, what are we gonna do next week? We did particles, we did sounds. I guess we could do lights next one. What do I have on this thing here? Oh, lambdas. We'll do lambdas next week. That's a good one. I saw Lux asking about lambdas. That's another low-hanging fruit that looks hard, but is actually really easy, just like sounds. So we'll focus on lambdas. Eventually, we'll get into the HTTP API. That's a very complex topic if you're not familiar with APIs in general. Gotta kind of build up to that. Maybe we can touch on the main menu. Problem with the main menu is that it's like a 4-hour topic on its own. There's a lot of moving parts. Lambda is used for item transformation, like action switches item 1 to 2. Yeah, I mean, what's actually the definition of a lambda? It's got a math term. Oh. Like, lambdas, in my opinion, are there. You mentioned transformation, but actually, I mean, I guess that's probably a good definition for them. They're a function. It's a functional transformation. Like when I think of functional programming, I think of input gets output, and that's it. Whereas object-oriented programming is you build a structure, you make objects, they collaborate, integrate together, and eventually they come to a solution through their collaboration. But like lambdas are input gets output. They're functional. So for an input, what output are you expecting? And the lambda is the code in between, is the best way of putting it. So in your example, switches item 1 to item 2, and that item 1 is a long wooden stick and the item 2 is a short wooden stick. The lambda would be the glue in between that actually takes the long wooden stick, turns it into the 2 short sticks, and also applies the damage and any other properties. It's like the glue in between. So while the example you provide, it's that, but it's so much more. You can use lambdas for so many other like functional things. It's very useful. It's essentially an anonymous function. You can build some logic, package it up into like this atomic unit, and then say run. And it's very useful for threading or concurrent processing. So stuff like that. It really enables some cool things. All right. If I don't stop, I'll jump onto that and spend another 2 hours. Cool. All right. Thank you all. And we'll go ahead and end it. See you next week. Bye.